Heath Fox, Executive Director of the La Jolla Historical Society. Welcome to the 2021 Virtual Garden Tour. Today, we're going to visit 4 gardens, each of which has been on the garden tour in recent years. We'll talk to the garden owners, see how the garden has grown in, and talk about what's changed. Next year, on May 14th, 2022, we plan to return to the in-person Secret Garden Tour, just as you've known in past years, with a self-guided tour, a platinum tour, and a Secret Garden Boutique right here on the grounds at Wisteria Cottage. And today, as a special preview, we're going to visit one of the gardens scheduled for next year's tour. During the presentations, if you have questions, please type them into the Q&A located on the toolbar at the bottom of your screen. After the presentations are over, we're going to have a live discussion and we'll try to answer as many of your questions as we can. Let's get started with the co-chairs of the Secret Garden Tour of La Jolla, Meg Davis and Lucy Jackson.
Good evening. Welcome to the 2021 Virtual Secret Garden Tour. I'm Lucy Jackson, here with my co-chair, Meg Davis.
Thank you, Lucy. We would like to thank our 5 garden owners who have so graciously shared their time and their gardens with us again this year. They'll tell us the history of the gardens, their vision, tips and tricks, and their favorite parts of the garden.
We'd also like to thank our sponsors, for without you, tonight would not be possible. We truly appreciate your support and are so glad you could join us on our tour this year.
Absolutely. And don't forget, save the date, May 14th, 2022, for the next physical Secret Garden Tour of La Jolla.
Now sit back and relax and enjoy the beautiful tour of the La Jolla Gardens.
I'm with Carolyn LaPierre in her garden that was on the 2017 Secret Garden Tour. And Carolyn and her husband Dexter have built their garden from scratch when they bought this home about 10 years ago now.
That's correct.
And we're in the main feature of her garden, which is the rose garden, around which they've built different garden rooms. And we'll visit those in a few minutes. But I want to talk about this rose garden a little bit. So this was originally, when you bought the house, this was a swimming pool.
It
and
was
you converted
huge.
it to a garden.
Yes.
So did you take the pool out and infill it, or did you just fill in the pool? How'd you build this garden?
We had a professional company come out, and they imploded it, actually. We have pictures of that. It was really exciting, and they had some skip loaders back here and moving the dirt and filled it in beautifully. And he said he'd never give me a rose garden, but he did. Right? Remember the song?
Yeah.
Okay, so we planted 35 roses, and of course, the fountain. And here we are.
And how many different varieties among those 35?
35.
35 different
35,
varieties.
yes.
And surrounded by a box hedge that
Correct.
you put in.
Yes.
And also some lovely lavender growing
Yes,
in this garden
yes.
as well. It's wonderful. What a great centerpiece for your garden.
Thank you.
So Carolyn, we're in the living room of your garden, which is just adjacent, just off of the rose garden. And this room has a lot of structure to it. It's got the wonderful fireplace, the stone fireplace. It's got the lattice work. Did you build this?
We designed it and we built it. We obviously had a pro doing the core of this and the plumbing, but my husband did all of the stonework, and we did the overhang, and we just had Holly put up there so we could sit here in the rain when it rains, if it ever rains. But in California, it's wonderful to sit outside.
And you use this room
all the time.
Yeah, yeah. And adjacent is the dining room, yes?
Yes, it is. And the table was built by my husband and me, designed, and it fits at least 20 people, which is wonderful for friends and family.
Yes. And you've got a wonderful southerly view off of this dining room.
We do.
From your garden. And Carolyn, a wonderful little planting bed here. Tell us about this.
That was just erected. I needed some shade for all of the shade plants, so there we are. And at night it's lit up. It's very pretty.
Carolyn, this is a lovely corner of your garden over here. Is this the breakfast nook?
This is the breakfast nook. A lot of mimosas have happened. Just a little different vignette.
And some wonderful structural plants that you have in your borders here.
Yes.
And the ivy really sets that off, doesn't it?
Thank you. Thank you.
And you have in your garden quite a number of these cypress trees. Tell us about these.
Well, these, the cypress actually are back there and around the corner. This is not a cypress, but I'm sure it's in the family.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. Is this an arborvitae?
Yes.
Ah. They look very much alike, don't they?
Yes, they do. And this is a strawberry tree.
Carolyn, we're in your front garden now. It's a walled garden. And it's lovely, small garden. It's got wonderful seating areas. And it's characterized by some short trees here. Tell us about these trees in your front garden.
The Japanese pine was here when we moved in, and it was so lovely that we kept it, and we will always keep it. And next to it are its maybe relations, Japanese maple, and those are glorious when the leaves come out. They're light green, yellow, and then with umber on the tips, and they're really marvelous.
At what time of year do those leaves come out?
They will be out in the next month.
So Carolyn, we're in your very front garden now, right adjacent to the street. A beautiful garden characterized by small trees and shrubs of a number of varieties. Can you talk about some of these varieties?
This is a rock rose, and it's just come out in the last couple of weeks. Now, I have a gardenia that loves the sun, unusually, and that will come out probably in the next month. Very fragrant. And this is a type of rosemary bush. And everything is just kind of growing up in a concert, and they love each other, so as you can see.
It's a beautiful front garden. I love these shrubs and the way they work with these small trees. Well, I want to thank you, Carolyn, for allowing us back in your garden this year of 2021 for the virtual garden tour. And we, again, thank you so much for having your garden on the Secret Garden Tour a few years ago in 2017.
Always our pleasure.
Thank you very, very much.
You're very welcome.
We're here this afternoon in La Jolla Shores at a historically designated house with a beautiful garden around it that was on the 2017 Secret Garden Tour and was the host garden for the 2018 Friday Evening Garden Party. And I'm here with Aaron McConkey, the homeowner and the gardener who built this lovely garden. Aaron, can you talk to us about your vision for this garden when you built it?
Okay, well, we bought the house in 2008, and the reason we really wanted this house was for the gardens. It's on a large lot, and it already had some really established spaces. There were garden walls everywhere, and the space was divided up into beautiful rooms. They were just overgrown, and the plantings had seen better days. So we started piece by piece. We started with the front yard and the street frontage in 2008. Immediately when we moved in, we landscaped that. And then over the years, slowly worked our way around to all the other corners. And with the space behind us being one of the last spaces to go in about 2015. So a couple of years before the garden tour, we finished this space, which was a lawn prior.
Well, this garden has certainly grown in wonderfully, and it really looks lush as it has matured. And our viewers will be very interested to see this garden and the way it's grown in since they saw it on the Secret Garden Tour in 2017.
My vegetable garden right now. This is kind of the working area of my yard, and it goes through a lot of changes over the course of every year. I have fig trees and pomegranate trees and grapes on the trellis, and those stay in place. But these 3 beds that we put in change every 6 months. So I completely turn them over twice a year. And right now we have our summer crops, which is kale and tomatoes, peppers, basil. And then in the fall, I will take all of this out. I will use my compost that I've made to refresh these beds, and then I will put in my winter crops, which will be broccoli and snap peas and everything that grows in our cool season here. So I really enjoy that this space gets a makeover twice a year, and so if something's going wrong or things aren't quite working or it's overgrown, it always just gets completely demoed and a fresh start. So my beds, I don't use any fertilizer in them. What I do use is homemade compost. So a few years ago I got chickens, really with the intention of using the manure more than collecting eggs. The manure was really my goal because I knew I could make really good compost with that. So every 6 months when I turn over these beds, I take my current batch of finished compost and I top them off with fresh compost, and that is all that is needed as far as fertilizer and soil amendments to keep these fresh and keep the vegetables happy.
We're in the front garden with these beautiful iceberg roses that Erin has planted, and there's a story behind this particular corner of your garden. Tell us about that, Erin.
Okay, so when we bought the house, we had hopes of having it designated historic with the city. And one of the sticking points was that there was a 1980 bathroom addition off this space. So we removed that addition. We put the facade back to its original, and that left us with the slab of the bathroom to deal with. So we ended up creating a courtyard with that slab, so a nice sitting area, and then the rest of these hedges and roses kind of fell into place around that. So it was, the space was really inspired by this removal of a 1980 addition.
And it's a beautiful, intimate space in which to enjoy this rose garden and the other plantings. Erin, we're here in a side garden that you refer to as the tunnel garden. Tell us about this space and how you developed it.
Okay, this space was really challenging for me to figure out because it was kind of one of the last spaces we did. We already had seating areas, a vegetable garden, courtyards, and this space was really just a pass-through. And so it took me a long time to figure out what to do with it that made sense. And then I saw these arbors come on the market and figured out this would be. We definitely didn't have a tunnel. It was one thing we did not have in our garden. So we planted it with passion fruit, and it's turned into one of our favorite spots in the garden. And it was super productive too. We get a wonderful crop of passion fruit every year.
Well, it is certainly one of the most enchanting small gardens that I've ever seen. Congratulations on this. It's wonderful. And I want to take this opportunity to thank you for touring us in your garden today, for being a participant in the 2021 virtual garden tour. Thank you so much for your time, and thank you for being involved in the Secret Garden Tour for the third year.
My pleasure.
I'm Heath Fox, Executive Director of the La Jolla Historical Society, and I'm here in La Jolla Shores today at the Villa Sansucci, which was on the Secret Garden Tour in 2017 and has only gotten better since that time. This is a garden that has a lot of architectural elements and structure to it. There are multiple seating areas sheltered by pergolas and different planting beds and areas throughout the garden that are very structured yet full of color. I'm in the formal section of the garden, which is structured by hedges that are made from a variety of planting materials including box, Texas privet, and rosemary, and popped by colors, for example, this Spanish lavender and this amaryllis, which are in full bloom here this spring. It's a great garden and one of the best in La Jolla. ask our garden owner to talk about when she built this garden and what her inspirations were.
Well, I think it was back in 2014. I moved here in 2012, and there was a big tennis court here. And my tennis days were over, so I just came out here, sat in a chair, and looked at the space, and I was wondering, what am I going to do? I knew I wanted to have a garden. My family, they're all gardeners. My parents, my siblings, and even my nieces and nephews garden. So it's in a gene in the family. Being Sicilian, you have a garden, you have flowers, but you also have food. Lots of fruit. I have peaches and plums and pears and figs. So it takes a lot of work. I have a wonderful person who comes once a week and helps me out. This is my happy place. It's and during this pandemic, I think I was saved just by coming out here every morning and gardening here and there, not all day, but just however long I wanted. And it's just a very soothing place.
I certainly agree with our garden owner about the importance to all of our well-beings that a garden can bring to us. Today, we're in a neighborhood above La Jolla Shores near the UC San Diego campus to revisit a garden that was on the 2019 Secret Garden Tour. This is a ranch-style home built in the 1960s with the garden surrounding the property. And I'm here with our homeowners, Catherine and Stephen Lee. And Catherine and Stephen, tell us about what you were trying to accomplish and what your goals were, what your vision was when you built this garden.
Thanks, Heath. First, I just wanted to say thanks for inviting us to be on the virtual tour again.
Thank you.
With the pandemic, it's been a great excuse for me to be out in the garden and for Stephen to support me doing that. We've been in this house for about 10 years.
Right. So when we moved in 2010, the front part of the house was mostly green. It was a lot of big shrubs, a lot of big bushes, and so what we wanted to do was kind of scale it down and bring a lot more variety to the front yard, and also color. It was very green, and then once we kind of decided to do that, I let Catherine take over.
We decided to redo our landscaping. We went with a design company, landscaping design company called Eco Design, primarily because, well, two reasons. One, women owned, which I really appreciated, and two, they focused on water-wise local native plants, which I really liked. They helped us create outdoor spaces for our yard, and they also helped us add in a little bit of whimsy throughout, which you'll see on the tour.
Well, Catherine, there's a great example of that whimsy right here in the front garden with this stream bed and these sculptural metal fish that you have running through them. And Stephen mentioned that you wanted to introduce color in your garden, and you've certainly done that. Can you talk about some of the plantings in your front garden here?
A lot of the plants, as I said, are native to San Diego. Some of them are also native to Australia, which is a nod to my roots. I was born in Sydney. My family's all from Australia. So in the middle of the garden is an acacia. We also have some pincushion plants, which are beautiful. And towards the porch are some very vibrant kangaroo paw that are really doing well right at this time of year.
It's a beautiful front garden. And now, Stephen and Catherine, I'd like you to take me on a walk on your garden path around to the side.
All right, let's go. So a couple things I'd love to point out in this front garden are that people often comment on is this ground cover is called parrot's beak. It's beautiful at this time of year. It does really well in sun. This is called a black rose aeonium, which is really beautiful. The blue is a salvia, the yellow is a salvia, and these are called aspergillus, which give a lot of great definition and variety to the plantings up here.
We're in a small garden room off to the east side of your home. Tell us about this wonderful space.
This is an example of how we try to make a small space more beautiful and more meaningful to us. One of the things that I've done a lot, as you'll see as we go around the garden, is incorporate salvage materials. These are old French doors, and I loved this concept of a pergola that incorporated old and new together. It's off our master. It's really beautiful to look at. It's extremely peaceful. Over here is an example of another salvaged item. This is a spool, an industrial spool that I've painted and made a tabletop out of wine corks. A friend and I found at the Scripps Institute of Oceanography during a walk there. We went back and asked if I could have it. They gave it to me, and you'll see a couple more of them.
And Catherine, I noticed just down the garden path here, there's an area of your garden that's a new garden that was not there on the 2019 tour. And I'm anxious for you to tell me about that.
That's right.
Shall we go?
The family rose garden. So, as he's mentioned, this is a new area to the garden since the last time we were on the garden tour. This is the family rose garden. And I think it's a great example of how gardens can evolve and change over time. And when you have an area that you're not quite satisfied with, I think it's okay to pull it up and create something new and beautiful. So my husband and I built this last year around Mother's Day, and it's an ode to all the mothers in our family. So I have a big family, and I am surrounded by my sisters-in-law and my mothers, and it means so much to me. I love how the roses bloom. I think of my relatives when I'm gardening and pruning, and it's just a really, really nice area. The other thing I wanted to mention about this area, I said earlier that we like to incorporate whimsy in our garden, and one of the reasons we do that is because it's really meaningful to us. So I've got little objects in places that remind me of special times. Like this is actually, these are wind spinners from a family trip to Australia 2 years ago. And I love seeing them spin. Over here is a sign that says the Family Rose Garden. My daughter made that for me using a wood burning kit after we created this Mother's Day garden. And finally, over here is a birdhouse that is from Sonoma County that I bought with my best friends, my childhood best friends. We signed it underneath. I think of them every time I see it. What I love about this area also is it's right next to our favorite conversation area and gathering space, which is this area right here. It's where our family loves to come out. We play with the dog.
Catherine, this is another new area in your garden that our visitors didn't see in 2019. They'll remember this magnificent olive tree you have here, but tell us about these new plantings.
So this is an area that I'm really excited about. It's a pollinator garden. And again, I talked about creating spaces that bring you enjoyment. I really love watching birds. I love seeing butterflies. I love seeing bees. So I created out of a wagon wheel right here a pollinator garden with all sorts of annuals and perennials that attract all sorts of winged creatures. It's lovely. And over here, I also built a fountain. A friend dropped off, we were talking about salvaged items, a friend dropped off an old water pump, and I looked up how to turn it into something, and I think it turned out really well.
And we all know how important pollinators are to sustainability. So this is not only a beautiful space you've created, but an important one as well.
That's right. And the other thing that I'm proud to show you is our monarch butterfly station.
Can't wait to see it.
Okay, so one thing that I think is really fun about the garden this time is that I've created a monarch butterfly bungalow. My daughter and I started this a couple of years ago, and this year I think I've brought my game to a new level. So what I've done is get some milkweed plants and create a station for butterflies to come. They lay their eggs. And once they lay their eggs and caterpillars form, I have been successful in getting the caterpillars to come all the way to chrysalis stage by covering them this year with this mosquito netting. This is just a netting that I got from on Amazon, but what it does is it allows the caterpillars and the chrysalises to have some protection from some predator. When we zoom in, you'll be able to see that there's some pupa, some chrysalises that are actually growing on this, and it's been really great. In about 3 weeks, we'll have some monarchs. Another thing that I like about this area is the vegetable garden that's right next door. It's just a kitchen garden. I try not to overdo it. I try to only do things that we'll actually truly eat, and that this year is some tomatoes, some sugar snap peas, and some herbs.
Stephen and Catherine, your garden has certainly grown in wonderfully since we saw it in 2019. Congratulations on a beautiful garden, and thank you again for sharing it with us in this 2021 virtual garden tour.
Thank you. Thank you.
It's been our pleasure.
We're in our final garden of this year's virtual garden tour, and this is not a garden you've seen on the Secret Garden Tour before, because this is a special preview of a garden that's scheduled to be on the May 14th, 2022 in-person Secret Garden Tour next year. And I'm here with the garden owner, architect Laura Ducharme Conboy, to talk about this garden and her vision and the way she built this garden, which is a lovely, wonderful garden. We're in the knot garden made of box hedging that's just starting to take form and grow in. And Laura, talk about your vision for this garden.
I'd say my vision for the garden was more of a response to the steep hillside that we're on. When we bought this house in 2006, I think it was the garden, well, actually it was the mature trees in the canyon, which weren't even on our property, that drew me to the property. It just looked so peaceful. And so we hired Teresa Clark, landscape architect, and got her to help create the garden. I worked with Teresa Clark many times on other people's projects, and so she knew some things about me, and that I like things a little more formal. I think she coined the phrase sort of hidden symmetries. So I do like a little serendipity in both designs, and then I was looking for that in the garden. And so I wanted something refined. I wanted something that took full advantage of the site.
You, as an architect, built your new studio overlooking and integrated into this garden, yes?
Yes. It wasn't the original intention to build a studio. It was one thing led to another. We call these, when we're doing remodels, the might as well syndrome. So it started off to be replace all the retaining walls, and because it looked like, as I said, some of them were slipping down the hill. So we needed to do a little bit of structural work for the retaining walls. And so it started off with that, and while we're there, let me extend the patio so I get a view of the ocean. Well, what do we do with the space underneath it? Because I don't really like the look of a wooden deck that just sticks out. What do you do with that space underneath it? So what if we just make it a storage room for tools? And then it got a little bigger. Oh, maybe we put a little bathroom in there. Oh, maybe it's a little guest suite. Oh, and then around that time, my lease was up in my office, and suddenly the landlord wanted way too much. It's like, wait, I've got this perfectly good space. Let's just make it a little longer. So suddenly my office is here in what was going to be the tool shed.
Well, the composition of the garden integrated with the new studio is just a wonderful set of spaces, and it turned out very successfully. And we're going to show you some other elements in this garden, but we're not going to show you the whole thing because we want you to come back next May to see that.
Yes, there were a lot of challenges to building on this steep hillside. First challenges we came across happened right in this spot, and that is that there was an abandoned septic tank right here. And it was 6 feet wide and 12 feet long and 6 feet deep. And instead of the retaining walls failing, what it was this abandoned 70-year-old septic tank was starting to cave in on itself, and it was taking anything uphill with it. So, and the way that we discovered it was the backhoe was doing some grading, and the backhoe itself was a bit of a challenge. Like, how do you get the backhoe back here? Because this is an old property, 50-foot wide, got little side yard setbacks. Well, they had to crane the backhoe here. So one day it's doing some grading, it hits something, it's the concrete lid on the septic tank, it falls in, the backhoe almost goes with it.
Well, some unique challenges indeed that you had here, but I must say, this space now, this little garden room in your larger garden with the white roses, the jasmine over the pergola, the lemon tree here, what a lovely, wonderful space this is, and a much better use of space than covering up the center. Laura, thank you so much for allowing us in your garden for the virtual garden tour this year, and so much for participating in next year's Secret Garden Tour. I'm sure we're all going to be very anxious to get back and see your lovely garden on May 14th, 2022 for the Secret Garden Tour of La Jolla.
You're welcome, and I'm looking forward to it next year.
Great. Before we close tonight, I want to say a special word of thanks to Meg Davis, who has been the producer of the virtual garden tour this year in 2021, and she produced the virtual garden party last year in August of 2020, and we couldn't have done it without her. And on behalf of all of us at the La Jolla Historical Society, Meg, thank you very much for your very professional production of these series.
You're most welcome. Well, those were beautiful gardens, weren't they? I'd like to invite our garden owners and our committee to turn on their audio and their video, and we'll now move into the Q&A section of the agenda tonight. And if you haven't typed in a question, please do. We have our garden owners here ready to answer your questions. So hello, garden owners.
Hello.
Evening.
Hello.
Okay, so we have a few questions that have come in, and let's see. Carolyn, we have one for you, and the question is, what was the inspiration for your garden's design?
My inspiration, no doubt, came from my experiences in theater and the many travels we have been fortunate to take. I love to create and stage little vignettes throughout the garden, and it's especially wonderful to see people walk through and smile.
Wonderful. Okay, Catherine, we have one for you. How did you get interested in monarch butterflies and milkweed? And can you give us an update on your chrysalis?
Sure. I think I'd read an article a few years ago about the decline of the monarch butterfly population, which people here in California have probably heard about. There used to be thousands and thousands of monarch butterflies in an area called Pacific Grove. And that number has declined over the years down to the point where this past year there were no monarch butterflies. And a lot of that is due to habitat loss during the winter. And so I had read that adding milkweed to your garden and native flowers would help draw monarchs in. And so we got really into it, and it's extremely satisfying. So my garden currently has about 5 milkweed plants in addition to the ones you saw. So I'm sort of rotating milkweed in and out at their various stages of chrysalis formation. And right now the chrysalises that were featured in this, there are about 15 that I can find in the garden. They're very Houdini-ish, and so I can only find 15, but they're about to come out any day now. Thanks for asking.
Great. And Catherine, I remember you telling me that you were really concerned about making sure that you weren't leaving the milkweed out too long. Do you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. There's sort of some controversy in the monarch butterfly world about the types of milkweed you should have. There's tropical milkweed, which grows really well in this area, and it almost grows too well. It'll continue to grow, and some people think that is contributing to monarchs' cycle being off. They're basically hatching eggs at the wrong time. So I cut my tropical milkweed back after the season, which is really in the spring. And I keep cutting it down until the following spring. And I also have native milkweed in the garden as well. And native milkweed is preferred, but it's hard to find.
It is. Great, thank you.
Sure.
Erin, we've got a question for you. How hard was it to grow the passion fruit on that arch?
Not hard at all. It's pretty much a weed here. So probably the biggest problem was that I planted 6 passion fruit vines. I planted 2 on each of the 3 trellises, and that is way overkill for passion fruit because those, one passion fruit could take over the entire yard. So I do have to work to keep them in check. And by the end of summer, that tunnel we were in will be completely a tunnel. It'll be completely dark to walk through. But they're very productive, and that's one crop we don't share with anyone. We use all of it. So
excellent. Well, I think in the Secret Garden Tour in 2017 and the Friday night party, there were more pictures taken of people walking through that tunnel. People just love that.
We take all our family photos in that tunnel too.
Excellent. Great. Laura, we've got one for you. How did you come up with the idea for the knot garden?
Oh, well, there's a bit of an evolution. That area down there, when we bought the house in 2006, had a play structure, and my kids loved playing in that area. And right away, we built those curved retaining walls to make like a larger play area. And when we started working with Teresa on the design, we thought, oh, that'll make a great sitting area. And then once construction moved along far enough, I took the interior designer, Kristen Lamara Boom, who'd been helping us down there to talk about furniture, outdoor seating furniture. And the space just didn't have the feel that we thought it would have. And so we started thinking, well, what else can it be? And I don't know, somehow we came up with the idea that, oh, a boxwood maze might be sort of interesting. So I Googled boxwood mazes and I come up with mostly pictures of knot gardens. And then suddenly I'm intrigued. And, it was a fun opportunity. Oh, I'll design something, some sort of a love knot that fits the space because it's circular, but it was like not quite circular anyway. And then Teresa came up with some great different varieties of boxwoods because there's the circle, that's one type, and then the knot itself is another, and then the balls are a third. And then the landscape contractor, John Eastman, was, oh my gosh, so patient. It's like, I wasn't going to let him lay it out exactly by himself. It's like, no, I have this over here. No, now we need to scoot it over a little bit. But anyway, so it was a real team effort. That was a lot of fun.
Wonderful. And the drone footage was amazing of your box garden. That was so fun to see, especially with all the butterflies that were flying by.
Jim Brady is an architectural photographer who's a friend of mine, and he had gotten his drone license. And he's like, can I come do your garden? It's like, oh, that was so much fun to see it, though.
Absolutely. Okay, we have a question here that I think many of you can answer. And unfortunately, our one garden owner who wasn't able to be with us here tonight would have been nice to have her here too. But here's the question. So feel free to jump in and answer. What species of fruit trees did the owners find did best in their gardens beyond the obvious lemons, limes, and oranges, if that's the case?
Fig.
Oh, go ahead.
We inherited 2 fig trees, and they have been very productive.
And how do you take care of those? What are your tricks?
Actually, we take care of them very little. They've got beautifully on their own. We just clean off the leaves and so on, and make sure that the rats don't crawl up. And we feed them fruit tree mix, but they've done beautifully. So very, very easy.
Great.
And I would agree. My fig tree is probably my easiest and most productive outside of my lemon tree. We did put in a weeping mulberry a few years ago, more as an ornamental, but it really actually puts off delicious mulberries. So right now, in fact, is when it's putting off its fruit. And so that's popular. And it's small enough that it's easy to harvest. And it's small enough that it's really never going to make a mess. So weeping mulberry is a good one.
Great. Laura, anything from you?
It's funny because we put in a fig tree as well. And yeah, is it something about the climate around here? There's nothing we have to do. I mean, the lemons go crazy, the limes go crazy, but those fig trees are great. But we've discovered like you have to pick the figs, otherwise those giant green black beetles come in. Like, oh, they're so creepy, and they'll take over.
Also avocado trees. We have 2 of them, and we produced fruit for the first time after 2 years of them being planted.
Wonderful. And Catherine, how about you?
Did we lose?
I think she's trying to unmute herself. Sometimes Zoom can be tricky. Okay, we'll move on. We can come back to you later.
Sorry about that. My cursor was stuck. I only have a lemon.
Okay, very good. We know lemons do very well in La Jolla. Okay, let's see. Well, Catherine, I think this one is for you. Where did you find such a big wagon wheel?
I turned 50 during the pandemic, and my husband and I took a trip up to Yosemite. And because it was my 50th birthday, my husband was super indulgent, and we passed a salvage yard, an antique yard on the way back. And I said, you know what, that wagon wheel over there would be really fun to turn into something. And he couldn't quite envision it. But again, because it was my birthday, he picked it up with someone and put it in the car and drove it home. So basically, salvage antique store.
That's wonderful. Great. Carolyn, we've got one for you. The question is, your rose garden is beautiful. Which are the roses that seem to do best for you?
The ones that do best are actually my favorites. Isn't that funny? It's Yves Piaget and also Francis Milan. They're both hybrid roses. They're spectacular. In fact, the Yves Piaget looks like a peony, a pink peony. It's so beautifully opened and so many just flurries of it. Beautiful. And they're disease resistant as well.
Even better.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Let's see. Erin, we have one for you. Tell us a little bit more about your chickens and how you're using the chickens for compost.
Well, we got chickens probably about 10 years ago. And we've had a variety of them over the years. We're down to the last 2. I'm no longer replacing chickens. So we'll see how long these gals last. But I really got them for the compost, to enhance my compost, because I was very into composting at the time I got them. I was teaching compost classes and it was a whole lifestyle for me. So I got the chickens to be a better composter. And so that's really what I do. I occasionally get eggs from them, but mostly, every couple of weeks I clean up the coop. That goes into the compost with my vegetable scraps and yard waste. And, I think that's the secret to my vegetable garden success.
Wonderful. Laura, we have a question for you. Did they make use of an engineer to determine how they would build on the steep hillside?
Absolutely. We hired a soils engineer, geotechnical engineer, because I didn't mention, those old retaining walls were moving, and we wanted more information on what was going on. But in the various test pits they didn't hit the septic tank. And then the retaining walls are taller. They were, 6 feet tall. And the city has requirements. If you have a retaining wall taller than 3 feet, you need the walls engineered. So we had both the civil engineer, we had a civil engineer, soils engineer, and a structural engineer to to design the retaining walls.
Great. Let's see. Catherine, I think this is for you. The parrot ground cover, does it require full sun? Is it easy to find? And what care does it need?
Oh, that's an excellent question. It does do best in full sun, and it requires no care whatsoever, just a drip system. My landscape design company actually put that in, and I've had trouble finding it. So that's a good question. It is called Parrot Speak. I'm not quite sure of the other name, but worth finding.
Great. So here's one I think any of our garden owners could answer. First of all, it's wonderful gardens. We're happy to visit next year at the garden tour. Regarding the soil you use, do you find a big difference between soil you use in the ground and soil you use in pots? Is it really different for you?
Well, we know our soil is clay. I mean, I do amend it.
And we know Erin does.
Yeah, I have a pretty clay lot. I have patches of sand and then I have clay. But yeah, I don't use that in pots. Pots, I either use cactus mix for succulents and cactus, or I use, any potting soil I can find I have a lot of boxwoods in pots. Yeah, I wouldn't put garden soil in those. And also my raised beds, I haven't used garden soil in those. That's topsoil and compost exclusively.
We have a very rocky yard, and we built 2 other houses, and we had very rocky yards there too. I don't know if all you found a lot of rocks in your soil. Lots, some shells even.
We have a lot of clay and our back hill, though there was so much of the soil that had to be excavated and recompacted. So some of it now is like a structural mix. But for the pots, I, like everyone else, use something different, a lot of cactus mix.
Okay, I've got another one for all of the panelists. What is the favorite thing in your garden?
Okay, I'll go first. My 22 cypress trees. We brought back about 95% of them from Carmel by the Sea as little guys, about 2 feet tall, and now they're 15 feet tall, some of them. They're gorgeous, they're beautiful, and they're not deciduous. And they're just magic.
That's amazing.
I'll answer. I think I think my favorite thing in my garden is the structure. Most of it, which I inherited, the walls and the pathways. Plants come and go, so I really like the rest of the environment, and I can always replace plants.
I'll speak up. I absolutely love the pollinator garden. I think I particularly love it because where I put it had previously been sort of a barren area of the garden. And now I just really like that it's a focal point. It's off our dining room. We have a little table out on the porch where we can sit and literally like watch the show of hummingbirds and birds and monarchs. And it's great.
And so I've got my family texting me messages of what I'm supposed to say here. So my sister wants me to say that it's that weird spiky tree down there, the Dracaena Draco. And actually, to be perfectly honest, I never really liked that tree. And early in like the first or second year we lived here, a giant eucalyptus branch fell on it and like took it from this giant ball to these 2 little, powder puff support thing. And so it's grown back and it's like an old friend now. It's filled in and So it's, it's been here longer than we have, and it seems like such an integral part of the garden. But actually, my favorite thing about the garden is not a particular plant, it's the peace and calmness that the garden brings to me. I go out there and just it's a relaxing feeling.
Wonderful. Great answers. We have another one for all of our panelists, for all of our garden owners. What do you like for cut flowers from your garden?
I like the 3 peonies that I could grow, actually. They are ones we can grow in Southern California, and I get maybe 3 or 4 of them a year, and that's it. But I love them.
Not your roses?
That's second.
Okay.
It's just because they're so difficult to grow here. And I get 3 or 4 of them. That's great.
I actually like adding, we have a lot of kangaroo paw, and I actually love adding that to an arrangement because it's so unique in an arrangement. And I also like adding the aspergillus plant. That's very unique as well to cut flower arrangement.
Oh, that'd be pretty.
And in my garden, I don't cut much. We get the beautiful irises in the spring, and I find that if you cut them, they're gone after a day or two. And so I leave everything on the bush until it's time to deadhead them.
I also don't almost ever cut flowers. In fact, probably the only thing I can think of cutting and bringing in is my artichokes, which are flowers. When they've opened and gone that vibrant purple, I have occasionally brought those in, but that's about it for me.
Great. And we actually have a question for Heath Fox. And the question is, what does Heath find most rewarding about his incredibly successful secret garden tour?
Well, I think the thing that I find most rewarding is getting to know the gardeners and talking to them about their gardens and seeing the different types of gardens that are in the community, the different styles, the ways in which the gardens relate to the home and the architecture of the home, the various types of plantings that are in the gardens, and in just as interestingly, the plant associations, how the different plants are positioned in the garden next to each other. I like to see gardens that are professionally done by landscape architects, and I also like to see gardens that are done by green-thumbed homeowners. So the variety of the gardens that I get to see in planning the Secret Garden Tour, and that we get to present each year to the community at the Secret Garden Tour, I think is my favorite part.
Great answer. Let's see. So we're still open for questions. I think I've just got one more here in the question box, but please type in your questions for our wonderful panel here. Let's see. This is actually more of a statement than a question. This person says, we loved Erin's vibrant vegetable garden. We loved the beautiful rose garden of Carolyn, Laura's garden that featured all of the lovely plants, and the Lee's sentimental family rose garden. And this person says, thank you to all of the garden owners for sharing. And Lucy and Heath, anything that you would like to add or any questions you might have for our garden owners?
I want to know how you got started gardening and what piqued your interest into gardening, because that's something that I really have never done. So I want to hear from you.
My first garden was my first house in Virginia Beach on a lake. And I didn't know anything about what I was doing. And I planted everything I could find in the store, all the bulbs and so on. But I actually drew a plan, first of all, of course. And it was just by trial and error. And that goes way back. So from that time, I've learned.
I can go next. My parents have been gardeners my whole life. They have a beautiful rose garden in Orange County, and my in-laws are also gardeners in Michigan, where things grow so amazingly during the seasons. So I've always been interested in gardening. I think I probably became interested in it as a hobby. Honestly, probably for therapeutic reasons. It's very therapeutic to garden. And once you get started, it's hard to stop.
When we first moved here to La Jolla 15 years ago, we moved from New York City, and I had grown up with gardens before living in New York, but I never took an interest in it. But we moved here from an urban environment and actually into a different house than this, and promptly hired a landscape company to install a full new garden. And within a couple months, 3 months, almost everything was failing. And so that's when I became interested in gardening, because I had to salvage this failing landscape that just had been royally screwed up. So that's when I started taking over. So.
Well, you have made up for lost time for sure.
And my interest in gardening started maybe when somebody gave me, a good friend of mine gave me a plumeria plant that I've had for about, I want to say 35, 36 years now. And so it's not so much the planting of things, I think, as is the kind of creating of spaces. And the garden is the plant materials are, like tools or materials to use to create the spaces and environments.
And each one of you certainly have created those garden rooms, those garden spaces in very creative and beautiful ways. We have a couple more questions that have come in. Do any of you use runoff or reclaimed water for irrigation? And if so, how big of a tank do you have?
I do. I actually have an 800-gallon tank under my deck. And it was actually interesting. It goes in, it looks like a deflated waterbed balloon or pillow. So it goes in rolled up. So it was able to go through a very small opening and then be unfurled under our deck. And when it fills with it, so it goes in flat, and when it fills with water, about an inch of rain will fill it, 800 gallons. And then it swells up into this pillow. And when I drain it, it goes flat again. I don't know how practical that really is, because when it's full is when it's raining, and that's when I don't need it. And so I have to drain it before the next rainstorm to collect the next batch. So essentially it's only good for about 800 gallons, maybe once in the dry season, because, the way our rains happen, all kind of in a condensed period of time. It was a good experiment. I don't know if I would have, if it's wise money spent, just with the way our climate is. But that's my answer.
No, that's good to know. Anyone else?
After seeing our last bill, I was going to suggest we do that, but maybe not.
Okay, we have a question, and this person says, for a new gardener, for a novice gardener, what flowers are the easiest to grow?
Roses are very easy to grow, I find. Just take care of them. And you don't even have to prune them here in San Diego, but I do.
in my garden, it's those purpley blue lobelia. Is that what they're called?
Yeah.
I love the color, and I've planted them. I planted a row of them, and then I find them everywhere. I mean, it's a good thing I like them because they're kind of like weeds. They just pop up in every other plant, season after season.
I get those in my driveway cracks, and I love that.
We haven't talked a lot about succulents, but succulents are very easy to grow in this climate. And they can look very nice, especially if you do work with different heights, but they're readily available and easy to grow. I also think kangaroo paw just do wonderfully in this climate.
Absolutely. We have a question. This person says, we are planning to start composting so that we can amend our soil. To all of the panelists, what system do you recommend and where do we find it?
Should I answer as the former master composter on here?
Absolutely.
Sold that.
Please do.
I think in San Diego, the first place to start is Solana Center up in Encinitas. I think they're still around, and they teach free composting classes all over the county. And they'll teach you about every kind of system you could have. It all depends on how much room you have and how big your yard is. Or do you just want to use household vegetable scraps, or do you really want to bring in all of your yard waste? I actually only really compost my really tender yard waste. I send, all the woodier stuff to the greenery, and I just keep the really soft stuff for my compost at this point. But the Solana Center is a great place to start for just free information and even access to compost bins.
Great info. Anyone else want to add to that?
I've tried composting a couple of times, and I'm not very good at it, and keep winding up with like tomato plants growing in some of the weirdest spots. I guess you need to pick out the tomato seeds before you throw them into your compost bin, because they'll come back.
That's 101. You don't put any seeds in there. So tomatoes are the one thing that don't go into my compost. Unless you want tomatoes all over, which is fine.
So let's see. We are patiently awaiting the first blossoms of our gardenia plant. Should we do anything in particular with fertilizer, etc.?
I have two of them, and they are on the north side, except they do get some sun, and they're the type of gardenia that will take some sun. And I do feed them twice a year with a gardenia granule fertilizer. And they do beautifully. I kind of leave them alone too, besides that.
Okay, yours were really big.
They are.
Anyone else, any tips on gardenias?
I find that they need more fertilizer than just twice a year. And that was something that the landscape architect had said, is that they're going to want a very high pH soil, high acidic soil. Sorry, I'm getting that one wrong. And otherwise they just don't open up.
Good tip. Okay. So I'm just going to throw one last thing out to our garden owners. Is there anything else that you'd like to tell our audience about your gardens and your gardening experience that you'd like to share with us?
I will say that having great communication, if you have a gardener come into your property. I love my gardener. He comes twice a week. He has been so great to work with, and we communicate a lot about different things, and I'm out there with him often. but I think it's really great to talk to your gardener about what you're looking for and to listen to their ideas. They know quite a bit as well.
Great tip.
And I'd say my mantra is kind of not to get too attached to anything. Things die, it's not your fault. Replace them quickly. If it's not working, pull it out and keep moving. And that's, I think, the best way to have a nice garden. Just don't be sentimental.
I'll just correct, my gardener doesn't come twice a week. That would be incredible.
I was going to say, wow, that's amazing.
I meant twice a month.
Okay.
And we have a gardener who comes, he actually comes once a week. And what I find is nice is that if I'm just really busy, the gardener will maintain the garden nicely. But it's really nice when I have the time to go out there and get my hands in it, dirty, change things around, move things. And like they said, if it's not working, try something different.
We are the gardeners. We do have a crew that comes maybe 3 times a year to do the big trimming of the trees and that kind of maintenance. But we love to be outside so much. It is just part of our home, part of our outside. It's wonderful. And yes, we do have things die and we replace them, but they're like little children, and we cherish all of it.
Oh, that's wonderful.
And can I say something that's just a little off topic? I happen to know that this little family group that keeps pinging me, that there are the 2 women who started the Secret Garden Tour so many years ago, Linda Marone and Sue Vanadries. And how many years has it been? Has it been like 24, 25?
Yeah, we're in that range. I mean, we've missed the last 2, but because of the pandemic, but we're at 23, 24, something like that.
Yeah, but it would be interesting to like, what was the inspiration that started the Secret Garden Tour?
Well, last year we had the virtual garden party, and Susan Vanadries talked a little bit about the inspiration. I recall her saying that she's done a lot of traveling. She's involved in a lot of different gardening organizations and historic organizations. And I think she said she was inspired by something in New England that she had been to, and that she and Linda talked about this and both thought it was a great idea. And Heath, maybe you have more you can add to that.
No, that's the story that Susan has related to me several times over the years. It's a great story of how it got started with her and Linda.
Yeah, what a partnership.
Yeah.
And Susan continues to be involved with the Secret Garden Tour. She is the force behind the Secret Garden Boutique at Wisteria Cottage. And as he's talked about earlier this evening, we will be back next year, and Susan will be back with us, leading us in the Secret Garden Boutique. And Heath, I think this is a good time for me to turn it over to you to make some closing remarks.
Thank you, Meg. And I would like to express our sincerest appreciation to all of our garden owners who've participated in this virtual garden tour. We're very grateful to you for sharing your gardens with us this year. I'd also like to say a special word of thanks to Meg Davis, who produced this video, and to Brian Early, the director of cinematography. If you'd like to see this presentation again or share it with friends, it will be available on the La Jolla Historical Society YouTube channel. I'd also like to say that we're extremely grateful to all of our generous sponsors who provided financial support for this production. And I want to recognize and thank most sincerely Meg Davis and Lucy Jackson, the co-chairs of the Secret Garden Tour of La Jolla. And many thanks to all of you, our attendees, for being with us for this presentation this evening. We hope you found it interesting, and that we'll see you next year on May 14th for the 2022 Secret Garden Tour of La Jolla. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great weekend, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.